Thank you for joining us for this edition of the Foundation for Coast Guard History's Evening Reports. Tonight, Master Chief Vince Patton, retired, will present little-known stories of African American history in the Coast Guard. Until then, follow us for a little bit of Coast Guard history until the main presentation starts. Now lay before the mast all evening reports. Evening reports will be held online. Welcome to this evening's edition of the Foundation for Coast Guard History's Evening Reports. For those who have not gone to sea, onboard Coast Guard cutters after sundown, evening reports are held so that the executive officer can update everyone on the past activities, and they can then align accomplishments to the following day's activities. In much the same way, we hope that looking at the Coast Guard's past can be used to guide its future. Or as Captain Fred Herzberg, our founder, notes, reflect on the past to illuminate the future. The Foundation for Coast Guard History is a nonprofit organization whose purpose is to promote the recognition and prestige of the United States Coast Guard by highlighting its past, its contributions to the nation, and advancing public knowledge of the Coast Guard and her predecessor services. Before the pandemic limited our country's public gatherings, one of the ways we tried to accomplish these goals was to host Coffee with the Historian in the Coast Guard headquarters building. Our goal was to once a quarter bring in speakers to present topics related to Coast Guard and maritime history. Now we've gone virtual each month, and we appreciate you attending this evening. We will be recording this event. If you have any concerns regarding that fact, please drop off now. You will be able to review the recording at your leisure once it is posted. It will be posted on our website at www.fcgh.org. I will have everyone in the room on mute for the duration of the presentation. If you have any questions, please use the chat box, and I will pass again your questions along to our presenter. If we have time at the end, we'll open up things to the floor. And now on to our featured speaker. Master Chief Vince Patton enlisted in the Coast Guard in June of 1972 and started out his career as a radioman before changing rates to yeoman in 1979. Early in his career, he sailed on a number of Coast Guard cutters and held a wide variety of assignments ashore, including at air stations groups, recruiting, district, area, and headquarters commands. He served as a senior enlisted advisor to the Department of Defense task forces in Haiti and Cuba, and in 1998 was selected as the 8th Master Chief Petty Officer of the Coast Guard, where he served as the most senior enlisted member in the Coast Guard and as a personal advisor to the Commandant of the Coast Guard on a wide variety of issues. With his selection, he became the first African American service member of any of the armed services to serve as the service's senior enlisted advisor. If that were not enough, he found time to get a doctorate of education degree, a master's degree in consulting psychology, a bachelor of science degree in social work, and a bachelor of arts degree in communications. Most importantly, after knowing him for several decades, he helped officiate at my retirement ceremony, though that fact does not seem to appear anywhere on his online biographies. Not that I was looking for them, Master Chief. Nonetheless, I will now turn the helm over to number 8 for his presentation this evening.
Well, well, thank you, Commander, and good evening, everybody. And wow, I was just looking at who's all there, so I better behave myself tonight. I got my neighbor, Rear Admiral Steve Rashan, who lives right around the corner from me. I see Captain Bob Dish. Gosh, I see quite a few of you. I see Scott Price. My goodness. So I guess I better do this right. So tonight's presentation, what I'm going to do is this is sort of what I look at a little bit potpourri of looking at Coast Guard history, particularly African American Coast Guard history. There's a lot of things that we know, we talk an awful lot about, and I'm certainly not going to delineate away from where a lot of our success stories that we have about Coast Guard history. But tonight, this is going to be Vince Patton's little did you know kind of thing. And so I'm going to bring up the slides here and we'll get started, and we'll just make this conversational and we'll have a talk about it. Let's see, let me get it up going. Okay. I just got to finish teaching a class, so I've been in the mode of being on the screen all day today here. So, okay. All right. It looks like everybody can see that. So, okay. So what we're going to do is, like I said, these are just little known things that I have stumbled across over the course of my novice involvement as a Coast Guard historian, and as Scott Price will tell you, he actually hasn't employed me, but he hasn't paid me yet with all the things that I do. But I found this very fascinating of some of the things that we're going to talk about. And, and the most important part here, you'll see as I pick these, that these are all very significant, not just a little bit of known things about who was the first at what, or whatever case may be, but significant to the Coast Guard as itself, that I like to say these are braggers' rights. So let's start with the first one. Well, have you ever heard of the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Adams? Well, I'll be honest with you, it wasn't until probably about a little more than a year ago that I heard about the Coast Guard cutter Adams. And yes, such a ship existed, although the picture that you see in there is not exactly the Coast Guard cutter Adams, but that's what the class of that particular type of ship is. It was a Navy sub chaser that was commissioned in January of 1920. And it was home ported in New London, Connecticut. Now, the significance of this was named after steward's mate James Jenkins Adams, who perished aboard the USS or the USCG Tampa back on 26 September of 1918. And when the ships, for those who remember, you'll see some of these designations, USS and in parentheses CG, is that when the ships were turned over to the Coast Guard during World War I as well as World War II, that's where most of the designations were. I think the exceptions to that, and like I said, I've got historians here who can probably say it a little bit clearer than I have, is that if a ship was designated as a USCGC, for the most part, they remained that. But if it was a USS Navy type vessel, or if it was commissioned as a during the time of a war and so forth, it would carry those particular designations. But again, the interesting part of this is that look at this, 1920, January 1920, when we, the Coast Guard, had a ship commissioned after an African American. Little is known about James Jenkins Adams. I found I was going to show this on here, but it just did not come out very clear. It was like a one little card that really just sort of represented his service record, so to speak, and it said very little other than the fact of when he came in, what his name was, and what his particular position was. In fact, on that card, it said cabin steward, which was probably what the rank designation was back in those days, but sort of translated to a steward's mate. But for whatever reason, and however it came out, which was pretty wonderful, is the fact that the Coast Guard did commission this particular ship and named it after steward's mate James Jenkins Adams. So guess what? When did the Navy name its first ship after an African American? I'm not sure exactly when it is, but it certainly was not back at this particular time. What we see here is braggers' rights. Another one here is the first USCGC Yacona. Now, a lot of us old guys on here, we all know and remember the USCGC Kona from our era and so forth. But there was a Coast Guard cutter Yacona way back when, commissioned back in October 1919. It turned out to be a paddle river boat, as you see there, that was used primarily for flood relief efforts and so forth, and commissioned, like I said, on October 1919, and it was decommissioned in June of 1925. It was home port in Vicksburg, Mississippi, but it sailed all around both the Mississippi as well as the Ohio River, just sort of involved with a lot of the flood relief efforts that occurred around during that time. Now, as you look at the picture and you look at the crew, what do you see? You see an integrated crew, which is quite interesting because remember, let's go back and look at those dates and look at the crew. So this was a time of when the Coast Guard actually had an integrated crew. Now, there's little information that I can find, and I know I had been in chat with Bill Thiessen about this, and I know he was doing some research and trying to find as much information about it. But it seems like this is one of those things that might have been, it wasn't an experiment, it was a needed thing. Maybe it was a question of getting more manpower that was needed in such a short period of time, or maybe it was a case of looking for people who were much more familiar with the surroundings of that area, which made them much more suited for the vessel. It could be a number of reasons, but it's just interesting of the fact that during that particular time, even as we look at the military, we look at the Coast Guard, we even look at any other efforts in the country, to where we had an integrated workforce like this. Now, of course, as you see at that integrated workforce, you see all the officers are white. You also see that the chief petty officers, although I believe there is, and I'm not sure because the picture, not sure if that is a chief petty officer or if that's a steward. It's hard to tell standing there in the group there, but my guess is probably a steward, because I would have guessed that if that person was a chief, probably would have been down in the front row based on how everyone is by ranks. But in that crowd, not everybody standing there are all seamen or firemen. There stands a couple of rated people in there that were either boatswain mates or motor machinist mates or something along those lines. So again, we have an integrated crew that occurred way back when, long before the integration of the armed forces that occurred. Once again, it's braggers' rights. I found this very interesting. I got some old uh, magazines that were given to me by an individual, and actually he gave them to me and said, "Hey, I know you guys are working on the Coast Guard Museum, and maybe they might like to see something like this." And I said, "Well, you know what? I'll hang on to them, and then if there's ever a need for it, I'll let the historian's office, as well as who the curator for the new Coast Guard Museum would be." But as I started thumbing through them, and I've got a stack of them too, I came across this. Now, if you can't read this, it's this came out of a March 1944 issue of All Hands magazine, which was the Coast Guard magazine. And as you see, the Communication Speed King. 3 messengers of speed from the District Communications Office are, left to right, Homer Gillis, Seaman second class, winner of the Junior Metropolitan 100-yard broad jump championship at Columbia, and in 1943 District 220-yard dash and broad jump champ. Euless Peacock, bosun made first class, only runner ever to beat Jesse Owens, and winner of more than 500 track event medals. And Edwin Daly, motor machinist made third class, quarter miler, and New Jersey cross country champ runner up. The significance is looking at Euless Peacock. I actually read, oh, this was many, many years ago, um, uh, it was an interview that was done on Jesse Owens, and he mentioned this guy. He didn't mention him by name, but he mentioned about a runner who beat him, and and just said that this was the only guy that probably would have beat him in the 1936 Olympics, but did not know him that well. But come to find out in this magazine, here he is, Euless Peacock. So that's a name to remember. And also, hey, another piece of braggers' rights that the Coast Guard actually had one of the fastest runners of that particular time, Euless Peacock. Well, since the Super Bowl's come out, also you've seen, I'm sure all of you probably have seen the press releases that's come out about the commissioning of the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Emlyn Tunnell. And but this was a name that probably stayed somewhat silent to many people in the Coast Guard, as we see that. And and it wasn't very long ago that Tunnell received the Silver Life-Saving Medal posthumously well afterwards. But I was able to get a copy of his service record, and that's where I saw the actual request that went in for the Silver Life-Saving Medal for him, and I guess nothing ever happened. But all the paperwork was done prior to when he got out of the Coast Guard and so forth, and for many other reasons of sorts, it just sort of fell through the cracks and nothing really occurred. And of course, when as in the naming of the fast response cutters that were coming about, this is when it became uncovered at that time that hey, Tunnell never got his Silver Life-Saving Medal, and that was rectified. Also of interest in here is that in reading about his service record, which also came out into an article and so forth, that there was something else that Tunnell had done very heroically while he was serving on a troop ship, and there was an explosion, and crew members were on fire and so forth, and with his bare hands put the fire out on one particular crew member, receiving burns himself. He didn't get anything for it other than when I looked in that particular record, other than just a piece that said that he had been treated for burns as a result of a ship disaster of some sort. But this is just very, very important and significant that we're going to see the commissioning of the Emlyn Tunnell. I just have on or about October 2021 right now. The guest date is about the 16th or 17th, but I haven't gotten a firm commitment. I do know the commissioning is going to be up in Philadelphia, and just stay tuned to that. Hopefully, the pandemic will lighten up enough that a lot of us can go up there to be there for it. The Coast Guard cutter Tunnell is going to be heading over to uh, uh, patrol forces Southwest Asia, which means it's going to go to Bahrain. And so it will not be home port in the U.S. and so forth. So I think it's very significant to sort of, hopefully, in um, October, that there'll be a good turnout for people to see the ship as it get ready to go off. But again, this is a pretty interesting thing here. That here we have somebody in the that served in the Coast Guard and became an NFL Hall of Famer, which very impressive NFL record in itself. Working when he played with the Giants, with the Green Bay Packers, also as a coaching assistant. during his time. Phenomenal individual. He left us way too soon as far as age wise. I think he was in his 50s or something when he died. We all know this lovely lady, know about her, and I'm one of the people, as well as Admiral Steve Rashan on here, that got to really know this woman, Dr. Olivia Hooker. You know, I put her up here. I mean, this is something we all know all about her. This is, in terms of the her background and so forth. But I put this up here because I had a conversation with a Coast Guard veteran who, uh, I don't know if he was being flippant or if he really had a very serious question about it, but question about the fast response cutter being named after her in comparison to other people who were getting cutters named after him, and they've had silver life-saving medals and Coast Guard medals and whatever else that went around that. And all she did was just serve in the Coast Guard for just slightly over a year. Well, it's a lot more than that. Again, I've had the privilege of reading her service record, which is great in itself. I know Scott Price has too. In fact, Scott, I think you were the one that gave it to me. But the interesting part within that record, this is almost something that I would love to see Hallmark television put a movie on it, made for a TV movie or something. So just talking about the challenges she had gone through just getting into the Coast Guard, because here was a woman who never took no for an answer when she was interested in wanting to serve. Now, here she was, a school teacher, making something like $150 a month, and was willing to drop it all to go into the military. In fact, she was going to go into the Navy. That's what she wanted to do. And her pay would have been $50 a month. But it was all about her wanting to serve. It was all about her wanting to be a part of something bigger than her, as what she put it. And of course, the Navy turned her down because they were not taking colored women at the time. And she just happened to stumble upon somebody, actually a spy recruiter, and the spy recruiter helped her that in terms of getting it pushed for her to come into the Coast Guard. So, this would have never happened had it not been for just her determination and her sense of pride and so forth. So, without question, clearly, in my opinion, she doesn't rate getting a ship named after because she was first. She rates getting a ship named after because of the determination and dedication and discipline that she put in to become part of the Coast Guard as a whole. And even more than that is what she did after the Coast Guard. The fact that, to the people in New York State, one of the most notable psychologists, and of course she championed women prisons reforms, was doing a lot of wonderful things for society as a whole. And of course, you see one of the bullets up here that she was a survivor of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, which there is a PBS special that's been out. You could probably find it online, that talks a lot about the Tulsa Race Massacre, which was just a horrible piece of our American history. But as a young child, she survived it, and that was something that was very important to mention as well. George Pruden, Chief Boatswain Mate. Well, the U.S. Coast Guard received its first chief boats, its first chief petty officers in the Coast Guard in 1920. This is when the Coast Guard began to adopt the Navy ratings and so forth, and as such, when the ratings were all coming about, here we were able to select our first Chief Petty Officer, African American, who became the officer in charge of Coast Guard Station Pea Island. A couple of significant pieces here. One is the fact that while it was typical and traditional of sorts that African Americans and other people of color that were serving in the Coast Guard prior to World War II, primarily were stewards. there were some exceptions, and the crew of Station P Island were part of that exception to the rule because of the responsibilities of what they have done and so forth. And of course, we all know a good part of that story of Station P Island. My neighbor on here has been dedicating, I think he still is dedicating the effort on the history of P Island as a whole. But I think this is one of those other significant things in terms of George Pruden should be a household name, as our other uh, luminary folks in the Coast Guard to have that household name because of the fact that he became the first Chief Petty Officer, African American, in 1922. And I know that there were situations that at that time, going back to when the life-saving service merged with the to become the U.S. Coast Guard, that discussions and decisions were going to be made that P Island, at least its officer in charge, was not going to be an African American, but more to have a white officer in charge, but it would still have a black crew. That was part of the discussion that was held about. But it seemed that a lot of things took place to be able to change that idea and sort. And this is when Chief Pruden was advanced to Chief Petty Officer. And reading a little bit about that history, he actually had a preference that he wanted to be called Captain, because that's what the life-saving stations uh, keepers were often called. And so he felt that being called a chief rather than being called a captain was sort of a demotion of responsibilities for him and so forth. So some of the historical information on him was often referenced as Captain Pruden, but it was really the take back of the life-saving service days and so forth. And the interesting part also is that in addition to becoming officer in charge of Station P Island, also gets the designation of being the first African American executive petty officer when he served on a Coast Guard patrol boat in 1936. And there is the chief. So you can't talk about P Island without talking about the Berry family. This is a phenomenal family as a whole, and I got to meet a good number of them, and also have had the pleasure of serving with a couple of them, and knowing the Maxie Berry Jr. Well, let's talk about Maxie Berry Sr., who served at P Island from 1920 to 1943, and he going all the way up the ranks from seaman to chief boatswain mate. And let's keep in mind also that back in those days, up till 1958, November 1958 to be exact, the enlisted rank stopped at chief petty officer, which the pay grades were inverted. So BMC was actually an E1, not an E7, and so the BMC was an E1, and the seaman recruit was an E7. So back until 1958, when they created the E8 and E9 ratings, and then things changed. But Maxie Berry Sr. was a phenomenal individual who really sort of ruled the roost, so to speak, in terms of the knowledge and skill sets that he had in terms of being the officer in charge of Station P Island, and one of the most notable rescuers of modern times in terms of what he had done. And he also had a number of people who had served under him that went on to do other exceptional things throughout the Coast Guard as well. And so he was like a great senior mentor. Maxie Berry Jr., who I had the very wonderful pleasure of getting to know, um, as you see on the far right end, he served at P Island and continued his Coast Guard career and retired as a lieutenant commander in 1976 after 30 years of service. And then he went on to become a civilian working up at the Coast Guard yards. A wonderful, wonderful gentleman as a whole. And like I said, it was a pleasure for me to get to know him. And as we see here, 22 members of the Berry family have served collectively in the Coast Guard and the U.S. Life Saving Service, starting with Maxie Sr.'s father, Joseph Berry. So this is really the historical family of all sorts that we see that are part of our African American Coast Guardsmen. Well, here's another one that I wish I had a lot more information to tell you beyond what you see here. The Coast Guard cutter Sea Cloud and the Coast Guard cutter Hokum. The Sea Cloud, and there's more to tell you beyond this, but I just want to start with just talking about these two ships in itself. The Sea Cloud, which was a civilian yacht, actually, that was put on loan to the government, and which was then commissioned and Coast Guard manned, and it was a integrated crew. And then the Hokum, which was a Navy vessel, was also Coast Guard man with an integrated crew. And so this all occurred prior to Presidential Executive Order 9801 in 1947, which was signed by President Truman, that established the integration of the armed forces. This was also done before the Navy integrated its first ship, the USS Mason, not to be confused with the Coast Guard USCGC Mason, but these ships were all commissioned and manned prior to the Navy creating its integrated crew. Now, to tell you more about the Sea Cloud and the Hokum is to tell you about this man, Carlton Skinner. And a gentleman that I got the pleasure of meeting as well. And I tell you, the only thing that I wish I had done was record every piece of the conversation I ever had with this guy. He commanded both the Sea Cloud and then later the Hokum during his career, and was instrumental in establishing the integration of the Coast Guard in World War II. And the story that I remember most, and I'm going to highlight one of those individuals, was when he was on the Northland. He was the engineering officer on the Northland, and there were some difficulties that the engine room was having in terms of doing some type of maintenance of some sort. I'm not an engineer to exactly say what it was, but anyway, we're having a lot of difficulty, and he's in the wardroom discussing it with the XO and the CO and a few other people, and a steward just overheard it. And after the XO and the CO left the wardroom, the steward walked over to him and said, "Sir, I think I can fix that." And Skinner said, "You can?" He says, "Yes, because I used to work in a gas station, and I worked on these big trucks that came in, and and what you're telling me is exactly what I know what the problem is." So Skinner decided to let him go down to the engine room. First Skinner went to the captain of the Northland at that time, Captain Iceberg Smith, another famous name in the Coast Guard and so forth. And Skinner went to the captain to say, "I'd like to get the steward to go down in the engine room." And Smith said, "No, that's not what his job is." So Skinner decided to buck the captain and let the steward go down in the engine room without the captain's knowledge to work on the engine. And as it happened, what the steward said was correct, and things got better, and he fixed it up and so forth. And that itself began Skinner's quest. Right at that point, he became a one-person champion for opportunities of African Americans to serve in ratings other than steward. He did more than that. In the next couple of slides, I'm going to sort of show you just what type of impact that he's had on some of these people. Also most noted is that after the war, Skinner became the first governor of the U.S. territory of Guam in 1949. Skinner died in 2004, 2005, or something like that. And when I spoke with him in 2001, I went out to San Francisco where he was living, and I got a chance to sit down and talk with him, and again, just it was just phenomenal about him. And I also got to know a number of the stewards that served under him or knew of him and so forth. And they always spoke very highly of him, particularly these stewards who served on the Sea Cloud and the Hokum, and what he had done for them. And in fact, they started out as stewards, but they went on to become something else, all because of Carlton Skinner. So what did Carlton Skinner, who did he influence the most? This guy, Jacob Lawrence. Well, Jacob Lawrence didn't need to be influenced by anybody, to be quite honest with you, because he was already a prolific artist when he came into the Coast Guard in 1943. But because of the skill set and the knowledge that he had, of course, guess what they were going to put him as? A steward. But guess what happened? As luck would come up, is that Lawrence is going to the Sea Cloud. And the CO of the Sea Cloud, knowing who Lawrence is, decides, well, no, you're not going to be a steward. So it was Skinner who created the rating of public affairs specialist. In fact, Lawrence actually wore a yeoman's rating badge, but Skinner convinced the Coast Guard district as well as Coast Guard headquarters that look, first of all, you got to know who this guy is in terms of what he has drawn, what he's done, well known throughout the world and so forth. And so this is an opportunity to capture a lot of things about the Coast Guard, and it all be done through the eyes of Jacob Lawrence. Which he produced 48 paintings during his time in the Coast Guard. And unfortunately, from what I understand, that those paintings cannot be found. We don't know what happened to them or whatever the case may be, but Jacob Lawrence did a lot of drawings as well as paintings and so forth about various things about life in the Coast Guard, life at sea, life of experience in the war and so forth. And this was a man that, and I had the pleasure of meeting Jacob Lawrence as well, that just as Alex Haley always talked about his life in the Coast Guard and how it changed him, it helped him and so forth, Lawrence said the same thing as well, that he credited a lot of his ingenuity, his creativity with the opportunity that he had and was able to do in the Coast Guard, and the fact of working for Carlton Skinner, who encouraged him to continue to do the things of what he was doing. Here's another one, Clarence Samuels, another name that probably should be a household name in the Coast Guard too. Now, okay, let's talk about this guy. Well, he did start out as a steward. Well, first of all, let me back up and talk a little bit about his ethnicity. Interesting piece here. Clarence Samuels was actually born in Panama, and but of African descent. So he kind of fits into the Latino area, as well as African heritage area. His service record itself defined him as Negro. So by definition, at least from the military standpoint, he was black. But Samuels was a little bit more than all the different things. Look at these things he did. When he came in as a steward, but was able to become a bosun mate. Went to Pea Island Station in 1930, and was stationed there. And then he made first class, and then he ended up going to work for an admiral as a driver. And while the admiral had him as a driver, the admiral finds out that Samuel's hobby is photography. And the Coast Guard was looking at that time about adopting the Navy's photographer's mate rating. And the admiral wanted to be one of the first ones in line. So while we talk about some of the stories of Alex Haley becoming the chief journalist, here's Clarence Samuels, became the first African-American chief photographer's mate. Well, it didn't end there. After working through that for a while, then he was later transferred and he goes back to becoming a bosun. He gets orders to the I'm sorry, just before he goes to Sea Cloud, he gets orders to a Coast Guard unit, um, and goes back to becoming a bosun, a bosun mate, becomes a warrant officer, a W1 warrant officer bosun, and then when he gets orders to the Sea Cloud, he's commissioned as a Lieutenant JG, and he serves with Commander Skinner. Well, good old Commander Skinner, being the kind of guy that he was, uh, uh, while Samuels was serving under him, he looked at different opportunities for Samuels as well throughout doing other things in the Coast Guard as well. I have on this bullet here the first known African American to command a vessel. Now we know the story of Mike Healy, which the issue about that as a whole is that Mike Healy, by definition, was the first African American to command a vessel. But of course, we didn't know that until many years later, for obvious reasons in that history of sorts of that time and era during the revenue cutter service and so forth. But as far as being known, Clarence Samuels fits the bill here. He commanded a patrol boat 15 in 1928. Then he had Lightship 91, which was Frying Pan, and then he had the buoy tender Sweet Gum in 1945. So this is a guy that, and I know that there was an article in the Long Blue Line that's kind of written about him, but this is another one of those guys that I think really should be elevated a lot more as far as our history of the Coast Guard as a whole, because of the variety of things that he had done, because of the skill sets that he possessed. Imagine that, looking back here, that he was the chief photographer's mate. Come on, look at that. And then he moves on and gets to do all kinds of other things. So that's amazing. Oliver Henry. I told you the story of Skinner and the steward on the Northland. This is the guy I'm talking about, Oliver Henry. And I know his family very well. I never got to meet Mr. Henry at all. However, I got to meet his widow, and she used to stop by my office during my time as Master Chief of the Coast Guard, and she turned over Henry's entire record to me, and which I gave to the Coast Guard historian's office. But the stories that I heard and the things that I read in here about Oliver Henry was just phenomenal. First, of course, the story that we hear about what happened on the Northland, and then of course, he moves on to the Sea Cloud. It's like Skinner had his own Coast Guard going, as you can tell. That, and there's, I could do this if I found more names of people. I can do one of just Skinner and his posse of people who have served in the Coast Guard under him, and where they have gone on to do other things and so forth. So here's a guy that was a steward, retired as a chief warrant officer. Henry also became part of a OCS. He was part of OCS at one time. And now what I don't know is he did not take a commission after OCS. He completed OCS, but he did not take a commission. I don't know the story behind that, other than the fact that he did go to OCS. It was very clear in his record exactly what occurred. And Mrs. Henry, when I asked about it, she did not know. The way she saw it, well, he was already an officer. What was he, but he did go through OCS, and for whatever reason, whether it was assignment, who knows? But he didn't take that assignment. But he was one of the most important people in the world of merchant marine safety, as far as vessel inspection and so forth. And of course, it shouldn't be any surprise. I mean, here's a guy who was just in the wardroom overhearing a conversation about an engine casualty, and was able to go down and fix it. And then as he later on in his career, as he's gone on to become a little bit more involved and doing different things in the world of merchant marine safety and merchant marine inspection, that it was just no surprise that he was one of the experts in the M field for the Coast Guard. And of course, the fast response cutter is going to be commissioned this summer. I think it's going to be June, and it's going to be home ported in Guam. I've been in touch with the family, and it looks like they're going to do the commissioning ceremony virtually because the COVID restrictions, it's not going to allow a lot of people to go over there and so forth. But I really wanted to be at this, and I mean, I was willing to go to Guam for this, but I'll probably be watching on Zoom like everybody else to see this. But it's just exciting to see that. So I'm going to finish this up on another one of those oh my stories of the Coast Guard, and talk about my dear friend, shipmate, Angela McShann. When the announcement came out of the naming of fast response cutter named after Angela McShann, to some people it was, who is she? And and this is another case of the ship is not named after her because she's the first African American woman to advance to E9 in the Coast Guard. Although let's take a look at that. It's 2001. The women came on active duty in the Coast Guard in 1974, and as you see from that period of time to 2001, before we got our first African American woman to reach Master Chief and so forth. But here's the most important part here. Today, newly advanced Chief Petty Officers must attend the Chief Petty Officer Academy, which as it should be. When Angela was at the time was actually a senior chief, she was selected. In fact, we had a sort of a talent show of looking at people who we wanted to build the curriculum to what the curriculum is today. And I was involved. Well, obviously, I was more than involved, but I was a guy spearheading it, and picked her. She started out as a storekeeper, later became a yeoman. Really, just one of the most energetic, passionate types of individual, enthusiastic, and very, very smart. Someone who really know how to have foresight of looking at things. So the Chief Petty Officer Academy curriculum, and by the way, even the Chief Petty Officer service-wide exam, although she didn't write that, but she influenced how the service-wide exam, in terms of how it's focused to addressing more of the leadership aspect. This is the woman, this is the architect of that particular process. So you can't tell me that in naming this vessel after her, that it wasn't very deserving. Unfortunately, she left us again way too soon, passing away in 2001 from cancer. But she was truly a remarkable lady, and was someone that as we see here, that the Inspirational Leadership Award for enlisted members is named in her honor, which I worked on at the time after her passing. So this, and the other big thing here is also, as we see in that bullet, the first U.S. naval vessel to be named after an enlisted woman. This is braggers' rights too. Okay, it's not just the first naval vessel to be named after an African American woman. This is any enlisted woman. Okay, so big braggers' rights, and that's what I always wanted people to know first and foremost about the pride of our service as a whole. So that concludes my presentation. I'm going to hit stop share so I can see everybody, and open for questions.
Well, great. Thank you. Had we been in person, we would have been giving you the honorary golf bag tag for you, but I'll make sure that gets in the mail to you.
All right.
So we do have a couple questions, and do you still have time to answer questions?
I sure do. Yep, I sure do.
Great. So the most important one comes from Captain Bob Desch, our resident cheesehead, and he wants to know whether or not Emlyn Tunnel's service was recognized in his introduction to the NFL Hall of Fame.
No, it was not.
Well, we'll have to correct that then.
Exactly. And the answer is no. In fact, the NFL knew nothing about it until until when we were not we, me personally, but when the Coast Guard went about correcting the right in terms of the silver life-saving medal. And I know there's been a push through CBS Sports. They were going to air it during the Super Bowl, which they did not. When they're going to air it, I don't know, but they actually are now going to do something to, at least from the public side, CBS is going to talk about Tunnel's Coast Guard service and so forth. But no, it was not mentioned, and the NFL knew nothing about that.
So, Commander Bill Kinstry, you're going to have that one for action to work on that, if you would.
Oh, he is. Yeah, he and I, we've been in touch about that, and I know Commander McKinstry's. This is a real passionate thing for him. So he's a junkyard dog on this, so I know he's going to work on this completely.
So, going through,
all of us Packer fans know about his military history. So, just saying.
As it should be.
So I was struck by a couple things when you talk about Commander Skinner and his work, and how that applies to leadership in general, and that is the idea of developing your subordinates, listening to diverse opinions and different voices, and then more importantly recognizing that potential. And it goes to the idea of what you said too. We often name ships and buildings after heroes. And we often find heroes are really incredibly flawed people in their personal lives, who simply rise to the occasion as it's presented to them. And that this is not what I'm going to say to take away from them. But I thought it important is that we think about recognizing the character, not the deeds. And it's important that we move forward in that regard. What has been your sense of when you tell people that, as you've mentioned, what's their response?
Well, first off is that you get the I didn't know. And the second part to that, is that, it's kind of like, it's like when you dig up a tree, you've got all, the roots and things that kind of interconnect and so forth, that you just can't dig a tree up that easy. As you pull up, there's all kinds of things of what you find out and so forth. But more importantly, what you find out from the roots and how it spreads out. It spreads out, meaning you can put that into relationship of people. And how many people that this guy really impacted. And then there's a domino effect beyond that. I mean, like I said, I was, and I know Admiral Rashan was also involved with knowing the folks from the Stewards Mates Association. This is where I got to know a lot more of the Skinner story than most people have had. And so you got people who didn't really have anything to do with Skinner directly, but somebody else did, and somebody else did, and so forth. And so this is when I look at that hero aspect, I look at that hero aspect as just how positive that domino effect has been, and how it has been a very positive output for the Coast Guard, and looking at people who have gone on to do some exceptional things and so forth. Oliver Henry. I even put myself in that category, in the sense of that, I was mentored by a guy named Sonny Wise, who also came in the Coast Guard as a steward, later became a bosun mate and so forth. And when I was stationed on Governor's Island, my first ship, when I was on the Dallas and so forth, I got to meet this guy. And, he was touched and bred by Carlton Skinner. So as far as I'm concerned, that I had the same thing as well. So, but that's part of what leadership is. It is about that, in terms of how we are mentored, and where our mentor and how they're mentored and so forth.
Another thing, you spoke often about the braggers' rights, and that's a good point, especially when we lord it over the Navy. But last summer, when we went through a lot of discussions about the rewriting of history and things like that, you and I spoke when the foundation published our history position on that. And one of the things we talked about is it is not rewriting of history, but it's simply giving voice to voices that had not been heard. I mean, all of these people who posthumously were received awards from the Coast Guard, it wasn't made out of whole cloth. There were records that demonstrated the reason that was given. And I've taken to talking about them in terms of what Admiral Manson Brown taught me, and that is shoebox histories. Is that, the underrepresented communities know this history, It's just locked away in shoeboxes under the bed that are not shared. And so I wonder is, how do you think you tell the story? Everybody knows the story of the midgets, a family on the Outer Banks, but nobody knows the story of the berries, a family on the Outer Banks.
Right.
So how do we get those stories out of the shoeboxes and into the public?
Well, that's a good question. And you know, I'm going to make a pitch just for what the Foundation of Coast Guard History involvement is. And, you know, you are part of it. You know, I'm part of it. And all of us who are on here are all part of trying to get it out. You know, this is also an opportunity that during a cultural awareness month, such as African American History Month, and we're going on the Women's History Month next month and so forth. That's that other opportunity of getting it out of the shoebox, is that we've got to, you know, reach and find those stories, you know, and the Alex Haley saying of find the good and praise it is that we have to continue to reach those particular stories and tell it. We've got to also embrace those cultural awareness months, and I speak at a lot of cultural awareness months. Gosh, I've done 3 this week already, and I'm going to do one tomorrow. I tell them, I said, look, this isn't really just about that we're going to just sort of ram this down your throat to tell you that what all the Black people did and how good they are and so forth. What I'm going to tell you here is that this is what history is, and this is why the importance of why we need to embrace history, heritage, and traditions of our service. And our culture awareness months brings that opportunity to take out. And I'm going to steal your phrase about the shoebox thing, or maybe that's Admiral Brown's thing, the shoebox.
Not mine.
I'm going to steal that too, because I mean, because that's really what it is. You know, it is taking, you know, things that are like we tucked away in shoeboxes that have some very significant stories that go along with that. And, you know, and I think a lot of you, if not all of you, know that I'm very, very close with the Coast Guard lady, Lois Boughton, you know, and you want to talk about somebody with shoebox, you know, she's got crates of stuff that really has some amazing information of sorts that we have to continue to bring out. In fact, one of the things that I shared with the historian's office, this was several years ago, is that Lois had the writer's manual of the spars, of how the spar process all came about. You know, no one had that. It was a big report that came out and sort of got tucked away and lost, and someone Lois had it. You know, but this is one of those things that when that uncovered, it uncovered a lot of other things about our service that we do not know, or we haven't got any clarity about. And so this thing of us using these cultural awareness months, I think, is the best catapult that we can have to get the word out to everybody.
So back to the idea of braggers' rights, and we are rightly, who have served in the Coast Guard, proud of those things that happened. Coast Guard history is not all mermaids and unicorns. Earlier this month, I watched a presentation from Dr. Aker. She gave a great presentation about the African American experience in the Navy during World War II.
I saw that.
And so then, you know, she mentioned the double V. We talk about the V for victory, that the Allies, you know, used the idea that we were going to be victorious over the Axis programs. But that African Americans thought of the double V as victory over the Axis and victory over racism, hoping that their accomplishments during the war would transcend to when they got home, and they didn't find that. Can you talk a little bit about, was that the same feeling with the Coast Guard members who served?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think that's the same feeling that many Coast Guard members served. You know, first off, during World War II, the numbers of African Americans that served in the Coast Guard was about 1.5%. And I forgot how many people we had in the Coast Guard overall. I think it was close to 100,000 or something like that. But 1.5% were African Americans, and then I just told you a story about part of that crowd and the significance of what they did. You know, some of them got out and went on and did fine. You know, Olivia Hooker, Jacob Lawrence. You know, but then there are many others who were not addressed in this that we don't know what happened to them, or I know of them. In fact, you know, I have a lady I friended with. This was a number of years ago. She gave me a an album, a photo album, and I know Scott Price is going to say, "When am I going to get it?" You'll get it when I let you have it. But she gave me a photo album of her grandfather who served in the Coast Guard. Served on a couple of ships during World War II and so forth, and what he did, and it's some very interesting things. And but she told me about the struggle he had when he got out of the Coast Guard. You know that, but she said that's all he talked about was what he did in the Coast Guard. He was a steward, but all he talked about was what he did in the Coast Guard, how important he felt of the things that he did in the Coast Guard. He served on a troop ship, and he served on a Coast Guard cutter. He only did something like 5 years or 4 years or something along those lines, but it was great. But when he got out and he went back home to Baltimore, you know, being proud because of responsibilities that he had, the fact that he ended up becoming the captain of the gun crew and actually used the gun on firing on enemy aircraft and so forth. All these things he got to do and so forth, and he really felt that that uplifted him to the point with, as you talk about that double V, that it was going to lay very true to him as well when he came home, but he didn't come home to that. He came home to the continued segregated society, the continued discriminated practices that he had to endure for a good period of time. But she told me that he really enjoyed his life in the Coast Guard, and although it was just for that particular period of time. So that sort of reminds me of it. I forgot what the gentleman's name is, but I have his, like I said, I got his album, and I got some neat pictures, and I will, yes, Scott, you will get it eventually. But I got some neat pictures in there that just I wish I knew the guy to know what was behind some of the stories of the pictures. But I also saw in a lot of those pictures that as we talk about the particularly the segregated units and so forth, and here he was a steward. There's pictures with him with all crew members, white and black and so forth together. There's pictures of him, some things addressed about things he did with different types of crew members and so forth. And I mean, you can look at it and you can just vision that this guy really was happy in the Coast Guard, and it was not that he was in a menial task of being a steward. He was integrated with the crew in many ways and so forth. And there's a lot of people like him that are like that out there, that unfortunately they've probably moved on to God's life. But I'm reminded when I saw that presentation about the double V and so forth, is that yeah, the folks that came home did not get that experience of that second victory.
Yeah. So, Master Chief, we're over at the 8 o'clock, which I told you we could let you go by. But if you have a few more minutes,
Yes, I do.
okay.
I do.
Before you leave, you have to give us an update on the museum,
Yes.
which is an effort we all support incredibly. So I'd like you to do that. But if it's okay with you, I'm going to open it up to the floor. We have a small number. We have, you know, less than 2 dozen people. I've unmuted them so they can ask a question. If everybody could exercise some circuit discipline and not step on each other, I'll open up the floor to questions. You just need to unmute yourself.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, let me talk about the Coast Guard Museum, because that way it might be added to a question. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I'll start with that. And in fact, we had a board meeting earlier today on what we're doing in the Coast Guard Museum. So we are financially over the $75 million mark in terms of fundraising. And this is a combination of individual fundraising as well as money that's allocated from the state of Connecticut, from the federal government, and so forth. But we're over the halfway mark. We need to have somewhere in the neighborhood of about 30 million cash dollars, you know, actual donated cash dollars this year before we can start funding. We're 5 million short of that. We have a very aggressive campaign that we're working on at this point. I mean, we're pulling out the stops. We've got former secretaries of Transportation Ridge, well, he was DHS, former Secretary Andrew Card, of course, Admiral Loy, myself, Admiral Mary Landry, a host of other people that we are all sort of huddled together to sort of make a really charged effort to go out to make sure that we can start digging uh, uh, late this summer. And that we've got to start digging this year. No question about it. And we're confident that we're going to do that. Now, the museum itself, now here's what happens. The board, all our role is raising the money to build the museum. And then it's turned over to the Coast Guard. Admiral John Hickey gave us a brief today, and we already knew this, but he talked about the hiring of a director for the Coast Guard Museum, Elizabeth Varner. She's going to be the one that's going to head up the whole operation, the exhibiting, and all these things, and they're starting to work on that with the space that has been defined of what we're doing. We kind of got that all cleared up in terms of the space that we use. The exhibits, how they're going to happen is in order to make sure we capture everything that we want, and because we want this to be a living museum, meaning that we're going to always rotate, put things in. This isn't going to be a one and done thing, is that we're going to do it by mission. So the exhibit spaces are going to be laid out within mission, but as it's laid out within mission, it's laid out with stories. This allows us to be able to include those individuals, the Berry family, Olivia Hooker. This will allow us to be able to put those very important people that we've had over the course of our 230 plus years of service to put in there. And it's going to be a little delicate of how that's done, but I am confident and comfortable with the approach that's going to be made on that. But we're coming along, and as I'm saying, come hell or high water, we're going to build that museum. I'm really going to be, and I am, and I've been 100% behind it. Okay, questions?
Bob, are you able to unmute yourself? I want to make sure that that happened.
Well, Bob's muted. Well, tell me what you got on chat. Maybe that'll work.
So let's see. Don't have it. I have unmuted everyone. So let's.
There it is.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. I'm good. All right. Yeah, we're good.
Say
So,
hi to
Lori,
Barb. Say hi to Barb for me.
you have a question first?
Do I have a question? No, go ahead. Other than just say hi to Barb for me.
Oh, I will. Yeah, she said to tell you hi, so
Okay.
that's all good. So I found it fascinating because I'm a big student of the uniforms, especially at the stations. And I found when the picture of the one station there, you're kind of showing everybody's in the naval style uniform, which would have been a little unusual for a station in the 1930s. And then when you showed the Berries, they're all in the surfman uniform.
Right.
So was the first photo just staged in the naval uniform just because that was going to play better? Do you have any clue? No.
Well, here's what I can tell you. Because like you, I was into the uniform story too, and I got into the uniform story by virtue of trying to have a little history about the current uniform that we're wearing. So I which I've told everybody, hey, that's from the surfman uniform days and so forth. So
Right.
I did try to find out, okay, when do they wear the serpent? When do they wear the old naval type uniform and so forth? And as you probably know a little bit, as well as that, the surfman community, they were their own Coast Guard as a whole. And, and so it was a question of they wore the Navy uniform when they had to, when they were instructed, when the district came down or whatever case it be, put on the Coast Guard blue colors and so forth, as far as the district was concerned. Anything else, they went back to their surfman outfit.
Yeah, I just found it interesting that when the Chief Pruden photo, it's like that's one of the only photos I've ever seen from that time period. where everybody was in the naval uniform. So I'm assuming that was a PA event.
That
Right?
was what it was. I mean, it made the paper. Exactly. You're right. It made the paper. But I'll tell you that berry picture probably was not Coast Guard generated. You know, if, probably somebody came out and wrote something, and the district had nothing to do with it. Because you know, from what I understand, I guarantee you, the Coast Guard headquarters did not want to see those surfmen wearing those uniforms. But they did their own thing. You know.
Oh yeah, no, you know, like I said, that's part of the one of the fascinations I have is that whole uniform and how we've kind of ignored the history of it when we developed them. You know, that uniform, the uniform we wear today is because of that uniform.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. And you know, and that's why I did a little research about it too, because I came in under the old uniform. I mean, a lot of you guys know my story about how I ended up in the Coast Guard. That's another time. We could talk about that. But you know, when we went to our current dress uniform and so forth, and you know, I've refrained from calling it a new uniform because we did wear that style before, and it's a reminder of that is part of our history, and we've only just sort of embraced that more of our history and so forth. So, you know, and when I talked to Charlie Calhoun, first Master Chief of the Coast Guard, who was Master Chief of the Coast Guard at the time, and the advocacy, his advocacy of about wanting to have that uniform, because you know, when he came in the Coast Guard, he was in the Navy. When he came in the Coast Guard in the early 50s, and at that time, that's when the Coast Guard said, get rid of those uniforms. You will not be seen in those uniforms, because he was at Station Ocean City when he came into the Coast Guard, and they were wearing that uniform until the district said, get rid of him. And he said that always stuck with him, and that was his legacy when he left as Master Chief of the Coast Guard. He was going to get us back into those uniforms. So my point, as I tell everybody, is that look, that uniform was always there and was ours. So I don't call it new.
Master Chief.
Yes, sir.
Hey, look, I can't thank you enough for allowing me to be on this video with the rest of our former Coast Guard buddies. But
Can everybody, excuse me, can everybody mute for a minute? Because the background is, yeah, if everybody else can mute. So go ahead, Admiral. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's really being on this video chat has really given me some new incentive. As you may know, I've been working on a book on P. Allen for too many years. And I've gone through too many titles. I think I've settled on that, but this has been really phenomenal to be a part of this chat with you all, and it's given me new incentive. I'm still on a line in between on titles of the book. I've got a couple of, I think, decent ones. But, and as you know, I was involved with, in fact, responsible for getting P. Allen the Gold Lightsaber Medal many years ago.
Absolutely.
But you have now given me new incentive to get this book done.
Okay. All right. You know, we're just out the window here. I can yell at you.
Thank you, my friend.
But thank you. And I want to say this, really and truly, had it not been for you and for just that whole fact that you have put so much enthusiasm into P. Island, I think as we know it today, it's interesting that here I'm giving a talk on the Coast Guard, other than just talking about some of the insides of P. Island. I didn't talk about P. Island as in the Richard Etheridge days and so forth. I don't have to, because you have made it, a household story that when I say P. Island, people know at least that much, the very early days of it and so forth. But I owe an awful lot. I think we all owe an awful lot to you about that. And I know you've been working on that book, and I know the other big part of that, you're working on that book, is about there's just so much that you got out of it. And I remember when we were down in Manio, North Carolina, when we were doing a presentation, you were doing the presentation and so forth, and got all of that other background information. And I just said, oh my gosh, there's just so much here. You know, where do you stop? So I can only imagine where you are on that. I dread to see the notes and background things that you have, but I know you have an awful lot. But I can't thank you enough for just your energizing itself, because you woke a sleeping giant. You really woke a sleeping giant, and not just of the story of P Island itself, but it raised the visibility overall about our cultural awareness months as a whole. And it really, I know I owe an awful lot to you on that.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you, Master Chief. My only dilemma is whether or not I'm going to go by RADM or BM1.
So
make sure
Admiral,
that's in the bio.
we would be more than happy to host you with one of these presentations later in the year, once you get the creative juices going. Because one of the things I think is, while it is important that we highlight things during Cultural Heritage Months, we have to get out of the idea that once we've done it that month, we're good for the rest of the year. And we have to start telling these stories year round so that it becomes part of everything. So we would love to have you in a month other than February, talk about that amazing story.
It's an amazing story at that. It really is.
All right. Do we have anybody else? Okay. Well, with that, in the chat, I posted my foundation email. We would love to get feedback from you on how you think this went. Some other topics you may want to see explored. We do it once a month, as well as if you have an idea that you want to present yourself, we're more than willing to bring it on. You kind of got a feel for what these presentations are like. If you think you're up to it, go ahead and do it yourself. If you just think it's a great topic, let us know and we'll find somebody to help present the story.
Okay.
All right. With that, once again, thank you, Master Chief.
Thank you all.
Awesome job.
All right. All right. God bless you all. Semper Paratus.